So, hi everyone. Welcome back to Pnoe's podcast. This is Panos, co-founder of Pnoe, and with me today I have Dr. Steve from Optimal Heart Center and Body Lab from Scottsdale, Arizona. Dr. Steve has been a long-time Pnoe owner and user and has been implementing the Pnoe Metabolic Analyzer in his practice in various different methods. And today he's joining us to share insight as to how he's using the Pnoe Metabolic Analyzer and programming and the insights and information that he has been able to acquire about his clients. Dr. Steve, thank you for joining us. And I think best thing for our listeners is to hear a little bit about you, your background, and your.
Yeah. No, thanks, Panos. I'll make it quick. I am the director of lifestyle medicine here at the Optimal Heart Center and Body Lab, and I work closely with the cardiologist here to prevent heart attack, stroke, diabetes, and we work on a membership basis. And what's wonderful is that we integrate lifestyle changes with decreased risk of heart attack and stroke, and our patients range from 18 to 95 years old, and they range from people who don't have any heart issues to some that have already some heart issues. And we're all about quality of life and health. And so how Pnoe fits in here, it's a foundational part of the Body Lab side that helps support the cardiology side of the practice because the data is amazing. And I looked at a lot of different devices. I think it's over a year ago. And what I liked most about the Pnoe was the reports. And it comes down to reports. When you're working with patients, if you can't help them, internalize the data and make changes, their health, they're probably not going to get healthy. They're not going to understand it. But the way that it's presented is where the power of this platform is. Obviously, the science behind it is there, but the ease of which I can take that information and use it is phenomenal. And I'm come up with a if I can just share my screen here and just show you how.
Yeah, I think this is quite interesting for users to.
How it fits. Yeah, so basically, how I coined this Dr. Steve's triad, this advanced testing triad, and it's a significant part of how I visualize all the equipment that I bring in, because we use top of the line, state of the art. We get the best equipment to test people and to get solid data, but the data is not good unless you can apply it. So in this case, our goal with everything I do here is health and quality of life improvements. That's what we do. And how we do it, we have a patient, we have the practitioner, who in this case is me. And so if we want to get to that pinnacle of this health and quality of life improvements, we have to have some way of using data to get it there. Data is power. Data drives what our recommendations are. Without it, we're just guessing. We're using examples of maybe what we did in the future, in the past, to maybe hope that something changes in the future for the patient. But we want it to be specific for that patient. And that's where the power of the advanced testing with the Pnoe devices in our practice. And I have other devices. They're not VO2 related devices, but I have other devices that are strong diagnostic tests that are part of this whole process that allows for health and quality of life improvements. But again, I have to go back to the cornerstone of this, and really in any practice, is cardiovascular fitness, as well as resting metabolism and how that impacts caloric expenditure and recommendations we give on nutrition. And if I can say this with sincerity, is once somebody sees, and I present this to them on a television, I take their report and I just blow it up. And when they see that this data is specific to them, that the percentages that are recommended for proteins, carbs, fats is for them, it's not just taken out of the air, it's telling us exactly the amount of calories that this person needs. It flips I watch it flip a switch on people, because most of the time the advice that's given to them from practitioners is based on standard of care and what would be generally recommended to somebody. But what's awesome about advanced testing, in this case, PNOE, is that it's specific to that person. And I cannot overemphasize the value of that whenever you're working with patients or clients. Ponis, does that make sense? That
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's very much aligned with the purpose of the company, which is not just to make information from metabolic testing accessible, but also to make it useful.
yeah.
As a company, I say it in every occasion that is being given to me. We are provided the opportunity. We were provided the opportunity to make the information coming out of a metabolic analyzer accessible, but
Mhm.
then turning it into something that is useful is a whole different ball game. And as you
Yes.
very well pointed it out, this actually comes from the reports.
Mhm.
And yeah, this is very helpful for all of our listeners to understand how a medical practice like the one that you're running is
Mhm.
actually implementing that in terms of helping people who are chronically ill
Mhm.
to use personalized lifestyle recommendations to overcome their chronic illness.
Absolutely. So if I could, I'm going to pull up just an example, and obviously there's a lot of smart people, about smarter than I, out there that are probably going to be watching this. But I do want to share like an example or two and how easy it is for me to use, and then I'll show you what my interpretation of how the patient sees it, which as a good practitioner, everything has to be in the view of the patient. The,
Mhm.
the idea of just, saying, okay, here's the 5 things you have to do, now go do them. That's
Mhm.
one thing. Patients aren't going to do it, and they keep coming back over and over with the same results. But if you can engage them as you're giving them information, or have somebody on your staff, a lot of times it's a staff member, it may not be the doctor that's presenting this. I know the health coach industry is powerful in many of our states here, and all over the country. That health coaches are an integral part of this, as well as to present some of this information. So let me pull up this one right here, and hopefully you see um, this beautiful woman running on the treadmill. And this is a 59-year-old man. He's 5'8". He's 170 pounds. He has 24.2% body fat, which is pretty good, but he's not in a healthy area. He has a good level of muscle mass. It's optimal. He's sedentary job. He hikes on occasion. Last 3 months, no activity. And so he's got some other things here: abnormal glucose tolerance. He's got some
Mhm.
atherosclerosis, his blood pressure issues, some heart murmur, and so on. So he's got some things, but none of these are restricting him from exercise. So
Mhm.
none of these would be restricting him from a resting metabolism. None of this would be restricting him from doing physical activity. So the first start, I always start with the resting metabolism first. It gets the patient used to the mask, is probably the most important thing.
Mhm.
And what it does is it takes away the anxiety they might have. They really
Mhm.
do, because a lot of, we have professional athletes here, we have moms and dads, we have, just regular people, and we have, the high competitors. We have the whole gamut. All of them have anxieties when they're being retested or tested on something new that they haven't done before. And so the resting metabolism is a great way, because I couch it in, hey, this is the toughest test you'll ever do. All you got to do is lay there on a
Mhm.
bed with a mask on for 15 minutes, and it'll give me so much information you won't believe it. And obviously, I'm tongue in cheek because it's the easiest one they'll ever do.
Mhm.
And it gets them to say, "Oh, I can handle this. I can wear this mask." And then when we get them on the cycle, it's not as
Mhm.
big a deal.
Mhm.
So basically, what I'll do with someone is I'll go through not every single one of these areas, but I will tie it to what the goal is for this person. And I'm in a practice where I do spend 30 minutes with a patient when I give them their results. So I don't have any time crunch with that. So I have plenty of time to go over this. I usually don't use that whole time, but I have time to. And I don't read everything to them. I take the main points for this individual. If you recall, he in the last 3 months has been very sedentary, but he's very close to being in a healthy zone with his percent body fat, and he loves to hike. So I know this about him, so I'm going to relate all this stuff to him. So his metabolic rate is slow, and he was pretty shocked to hear that based on his height and weight. So I made sure I based it as, okay, it's slow. It doesn't have to be slow, okay, because there's some things that you can do, which Pinoy nicely puts into their report that says, here, these are the things that you can do. Some exercise things that will help your resting metabolism. But then, what's the bottom line? Why is that so important? Well, it involves fat burning. Now, I don't know a patient I've ever met that doesn't want to burn fat efficiently and doesn't want to burn fat. So
this is probably the most interesting metric for most people.
Yes.
We can clearly understand why.
Yes.
But yeah, go ahead.
And they see this and it just jumps out at them. And they're like, wow, I'm between poor and predicted. And quite frankly, for most physicians, and I'm a PhD, so my PhD is in exercise science and wellness in the area of lifestyle medicine. So for most physicians, people working with clients, we don't want them to just be where predicted is. We want them to be good or excellent. And that's instilled on everyone I work with. And so they see this and they're like, wow, wonder why this is happening. Well, in the back of their mind, in my mind, we're thinking, well, you haven't done anything for 3 months, so maybe this is going to help. And then we get to this, to the big power. I think this is one of the most powerful pages, is looking at fuel sources. And I've seen people on the whole gamut, as you will too, as you test people. I've seen people as high as 90%, and those are the highly trained, usually individuals, obviously. There could be some genetic component. Now, I do genetics here too, so I can kind of tie those together. But this person is just over 50%, which, and when I retest him, the hope is that he's going to be higher because he's going to start doing some training based on some of the information. So we look at metabolic fitness. Obviously, some of these are tied to the other areas. And this is another one that helps them understand, wow, maybe I'm not efficiently converting this energy, and it's making it harder for me to sustain my life, to be lower in my risk for heart attack, stroke, and so on. So, and these are things at rest. So it's very eye-opening for them. The diabetes risk is one that is important. I like it. We do a lot of other diabetes testing in here, but we always want very low. And so this was also what it did for us in our practice. It corroborated some of the other testing. But this is a good sign for people who have maybe not had any glucose tolerance tests or done any other things. This is a good example for them. And just
and just maybe here to add a little bit of color about this metric, because a lot of people typically ask us, how do you guys come up with a metric for quantifying the risk of developing diabetes? There have been several studies conducted at this point that clearly show that impaired fat utilization at rest, at a fasted state, is a very good predictor of whether someone may develop metabolic disease and diabetes, even before we start seeing elevated blood glucose levels during fasted states.
Yes.
And the mechanism behind that is something that we explain in one of our blog posts, because it's quite intricate. It has to do with the level of intracellular fat that accumulates in the case of people who are not burning fat effectively. And so being able to understand if someone's metabolic activity, or in other words, impaired fat utilization at rest, may be causing them to enter this high risk of developing diabetes, is certainly very important, even before you start doing, blood analysis to understand blood glucose. So, this is pretty much how we come up with it. And I just wanted to make this short parenthesis because we get asked a lot, and it's a very useful one.
Yeah, and I can say with confidence that I've never had, if I have people who are in their fuel sources 75% or above, they're always in the very low.
Yeah, yeah.
And it is also a teaching point for me with the patients. You
Mhm,
want to keep that very low.
mhm.
You've got to keep your fuel sources high, and that's how your training is going to help you at rest.
Exactly. So for most of the people that we test, this is more an educative metric,
Yeah.
educational metric, in the sense that it teaches you the how the fuel sources that your cells utilize can be translated into likelihood of developing metabolic disorders.
Yes, and I think people are becoming much more in tune with the idea of type 2 diabetes and the dangers of it,
Mm-hmm.
tied to heart attack and stroke and so on. Heart fitness, again, this person was at 50%. When if I can step back a second, so when he does do his training, and this was prior to me having Pinoy, this type of testing opportunity for them. I would bet he was probably 70 or 75 because he was a Grand Canyon hiker and he did some major hikes all of the time. And so
Mm-hmm.
the only way he could have done those is with better heart fitness. So this was another teaching moment for him to say, gosh, I'm sure I must have been healthier before with my overall heart fitness and looking at his risk that he already has that we know as in a cardiology practice. This scared him a little bit. This
Interesting.
and now fear isn't necessarily a good motivator, but when you put it in the grand scheme of everything here, and then you say you can improve these, then the fear ends up being something that they can control. And so they see the number, and then we can retest them, and then we can see that they made improvements based on the recommendations that were given. So lung fitness, his was low. I think
Interesting.
it obviously goes with his working with his tidal volume and so on.
Mm-hmm.
So there's an impact with that.
Mm-hmm.
So this is another one that where a great tool that we brought into the practice is the AeroFit is been a good is it been a good tool that we brought in. And what I like about it is when we do the exercise test, then it gives you actually a protocol for them, and it's a pretty great little gadget, and it's small, it's simple, it's easy to do, and
Great. It's great you're bringing it up because we're actually working with Aerofit now very closely. We're going to be announcing a partnership with them very soon.
awesome, awesome,
Just wanted to bring that up to everyone's attention that we
yeah,
recently conducted a meta-analysis study on all of the metabolic profiles that we have recorded ever since we started operating as a company. We analyzed more than 100,000 profiles, and it was extremely interesting to see that the top three limiting factors, that's how we call them in Pinoy's nomenclature,
yeah,
basically scores that variables of which the score drops below 50%. The top three ones were all respiratory related.
yes,
So they had to do with impaired lung function or impaired utilization of the
yeah,
existing lung function. That basically means that you may have the available volume there, but for a variety of reasons, which may have to do with mobility, which have to do with neuromuscular activation, etc. You may not be using this volume. And then another very important one is the one that's mentioned right at the bottom of the screen right now. If you can scroll down a little bit, it has to do with breathing and cognition,
yeah,
how your breathing impacts your ability to think via blood oxygenation. Because something that's very important for our listeners to know is that the way you breathe is by far the most powerful lever of how your brain operates. And that is because the way you breathe, your breathing frequency, your tidal volume will almost immediately impact levels of CO2 in the blood, which through various pathways will affect how much oxygen actually gets transferred to your brain. And being in other words, chronically hyperventilating is going to lead someone to, first of all, not be at their A game on a day-to-day basis, and also has been linked to several neurodegenerative disorders like Alzheimer's disease, etc., down the road. So these three conditions, these three limiting factors are the top three ones across all of our customer base to date, which is extremely diverse, includes everyone from athletes to chronically ill people, everyday people, etc. And because at the end of the day, as you very well said in the beginning, we're all about giving you a recommendation to solve the problem. We don't want to just tell you what the problem is.
Yeah,
in cases, the recommendation is to actually do some breath work. And that's why we're partnered with Aerofit to provide people with a device they need in order to do better breathing training.
Yeah, and Paulus, the other thing about what you're saying is, they may get a test done and they're used to hearing, oh, you got to exercise more. Here's your interval training, here's your strength training. But I don't know, actually, of all the people I've tested, and I've tested a lot with your device, I don't think anyone has looked at me and said, wow, somebody already told me I had some breathing issues. This is so new. And when you said limiting factor, just so you know, I use that all the time because we're trying to optimize people. So they may be optimal in 7 areas, but they're limiting their optimization in the 3 that will impact those. So they're not even super optimized, if you will. And the breathing part is almost like a missing link that I think there are some highly elite Olympic athletes that have coaches that have been working on some breathing, but to allow it for more of a general use and then to get the exact data on it and then to end up having a tool that you can use to go ahead and improve that directly and remeasure. And what's nice about this, and I'm a chief science officer for a med tech company out east, and what I like about this is the app is so easy to use, and I'm not a salesman for these people. I'm just telling you, it's so easy to use. It just walks the patient right through the exercise. It's really an awesome device, and every time you can set it up to measure your lung capacity every time you retest to see if there's changes, or once a week you can test it. So it's actually pretty dang accurate because I've done it with our medical, the $5,000 medical devices that you measure tidal volume with. But I know Pnoe does it now. So, but so they're the same.
That's awesome. That's awesome to hear. Yeah. Cool. And so you were.
Let me just move on with this. So the next thing that's exciting for them is, so I do a body composition on them, so I know body fats and so on, and they give a general idea of what the resting metabolism is, but it's not as accurate as this, obviously. So this is where the rubber meets the road, and we're talking nutrition. And as most of the people out there know, a lot of our patients aren't going to be calorie counters. However, it's hard to go into a restaurant or a grocery store now and not see calories. I was at Starbucks today, and they tell you how much calories is in something, and it's in your face. So even mom and pops who don't count them will see, okay, if you exercise for 45 minutes, this is what you're going to burn. Exactly you, not somebody your age, not somebody who looks like you. If you do your daily activities, walking around the house, doing those things, this is what you're going to burn. You, not anybody else. And then here's your survival calories. So what's really apparent when you start to say, look at the difference on days you don't do a workout and how easy it is to get 1,800 calories in food, which is
unfortunately nowadays it's quite easy.
You can have that in one drink at Starbucks, I think. So they become cognizant of this, and it can go into the app that you have to actually give a specific dietary plan as well. And so this kind of also then shows what the recommendation would be if this person in this case wanted to lose some body fat. Here's a recommendation. And so the nice thing about this too is that it's not Dr. Steve telling the patient, on a calculation, this is what you should have, even though they trust me. This is filtered down from all the data that I can't see in the Pnoe results, but the analytics gets down to this based on you. And this is, hey, if you want to get down to under 20% for this patient, this is what you're going to have to consider doing along with your activity. So, and then finally, probably the most powerful thing nutrition wise on this report is this section right here. And as I've been known to say, muscle mass is an insurance policy for quality of life as you age. And one thing I see as people age, and when I say age, I mean past 50 and above, they decrease, there's a decrease in the increase in the intake of protein. This is a great way to show them how much protein they need. And this is at a resting state. This would be if they weren't exercising on a day. So, and maybe 1 out of 50 of my patients would say, yeah, I get about that. All of them don't. They just don't get it. So this is an eye opener for them. Now, I do have to explain that we're talking about healthy fats and complex carbs, and we're not talking about you can go have McDonald's French fries and a bunch of fatty, high carb foods, sugary foods. It's all health related. These are all healthy foods we're recommending, but this is such a wonderful breakdown specific to that person. And like people that have the device, you can put in what their goals are. Is it conditioning? Is it fat loss? Is it muscle mass gain? So that's a resting metabolism. Do we have time to go through a exercise one?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, let me do that. So let me do. I'm not going to do the same person. Do I have a? Let's do this one. Okay, let me open it and let me share my screen. And this is, let me just make sure it's the right person. Okay, so this is 87. Just look at one more here. Okay, we'll do this guy. All right, share my screen. Okay, so this is a 67-year-old guy. Okay, and he's 6 foot 213, 26.5% body fat. So he has extra body fat on him. 20% or below is our healthy range. And I do also, just so you know, I do also test, like we have a world champion jiu-jitsu guy in our practice, and literally came in at 3% body fat the last time he was in. So I deal with the whole gamut, but I just thought I'd show you kind of normal people. At this time, he was not active. So the last 3 months when I say that, he's a Canadian. So he had the winter months when I tested him behind him. And he did some indoor exercise, but not much. Abdominal glucose again, calcification, blood pressure issues, hyperlipidemia, some palpitations. This is a good overview to look at it, to see where he's at. He was shocked because he prides himself on being a big endurance athlete. He does. He is when he's active. As you get past 50, the detraining effect takes an impact much quicker. And this is another teaching point that can help people that are past 50. I mean, at any age, but even more when you're past 50, to say, look, if you stop exercising for, a week, a month, 3 months, you're going to feel the difference much greater than when you did when you were 20.
Absolutely.
And here's an example of it. So this is what really jumped out and was the positive part of his report. His capacity was through the roof. His lung capacity was through the roof. And that's probably why he was even above the very poor line with his exercise test, because he had such capacity there, but he still wasn't well trained. And he wasn't using it. He wasn't using all of that. When he starts training, is doing some breath training and also his cardiovascular training, and he pulls this up to match his capacity, he's going to be up in the excellent category on these. So this was a driver for him because it was something new that we found out for him. It was also a driver that he knew he can't take so much time off. It's just not an important thing. And if you look at his breathing here is low, his cognition level was low, and he's a very successful businessman throughout the world. And this bothered him a lot too, that he wasn't excellent in cognition, because he knows he has to be in his A game, kind of what you were saying before.
Exactly.
and he's not that. His metabolic rate was low. His high intensity performance was high, and this correlates with his genetics. I just happen to have his genetics, which he has high genes for power. So genetically is what he kind of got that score because of his genetics, but his cardiovascular area was lower. Movement economy, fat burning efficiency. So these weren't that bad, but the focus was on his utilizing his full gas tank. He's just using half of it, quarter of it, to do his exercise. So then went through the individual ones, very similar, obviously, to the resting metabolism. This was very eye-opening for him to see that he was very poor to poor. For him, this was a significant motivator for him. I can't wait to retest him. And this one was one where I could say, you have such great capability. You have such a capacity to be so much better. Not many people have such a high capacity for respiration, and you're not taking advantage of it at all. Even if it's good, it's not good enough for what we're talking about. Expiratory power, again, goes along with the force of his lungs, which is pretty good, but his overall fitness was not good. His coordination was okay, but it all goes back to, I'm going to, not to give you a headache, it goes back to these two here. These two here are supported by these. So he needs to push his other ones out to get his aerobic and his overall cardiovascular fitness out. So we go through that. Breathing and cognition, he wasn't happy about that, or stability. Fat burning efficiency was as predicted. And as I told you before, was really good. Metabolic rate, capacity, his recovery was still good. So there's some mixed messages he's getting here, but there could be another genetic component. I know that he was moderately high in his genetics for endurance athletics. And then when it
just to shed a little bit of light here,
without
having specific insight into the client we're talking about, but recovery capacity has to do with the rate with which your cells are able to clear fatigue metabolites.
Okay.
And so you can very well see someone who is has a low metabolic rate, and that pretty much means that cells are economical, meaning that they can produce movement without consuming a lot of calories, which is something that you can get by doing, say, a lot of running or cycling or any type of movement that is going to enhance what we call locomotor ability. And this is typically, again, found in people who do a lot of endurance training or do a lot of running recreationally. You may also have low lung utilization, so respiratory capability, meaning that you have big lungs, but you're not using them effectively when exercising. But when I actually ask you to recover, your cells may very well be able to clear fatigue metabolites, because none of these two limiting factors actually play a role in clearing fatigue metabolites after your bout of physical exercise has been completed. So this is just an example of how one may be deficient in a certain area and may not be deficient in another area. It doesn't mean that whoever is becoming unfit or unhealthy is becoming so in every possible area of human physiology.
Bingo.
Yeah.
Well said.
And also what's extremely important to highlight is that obviously for the vast majority of people, having a low metabolic rate may be bad, but for people who are endurance athletes and want to be economical is not necessarily all bad, in the sense that these folks, for instance, let's say that someone is looking to run a marathon or someone is looking to do an Ironman, full Ironman, you obviously expect cells and muscles to produce as much power, mechanical power, which is basically movement from point A to point B, with as little chemical energy, which is the energy that's found in the compounds that we eat, fats and carbohydrates, as possible. So you want to maximize that ratio, which is, in other words, called mechanical efficiency.
Yeah.
Now, what we're looking at here is the activity report, the active report, which measures your metabolic rate during training, and that metabolic rate may be low. In other words, this person, when exercising, is not burning as many calories. And if he or she is a endurance athlete or looking to become an endurance athlete, this is good. Obviously, if you're looking to lose weight, this is bad.
Yeah.
It needs to be as high as possible.
Yeah.
Now, the same cannot be said about resting metabolic rate. Resting metabolic rate across the board, irrespectively of whether you're an athlete or whether you are a regular person who's looking to lose weight or trying to stay healthy, that needs to always be high. Because in the case of people who are looking to stay healthy, lose weight, or keep weight off, high metabolic rate means that you're burning more. As a result, you're less likely to create calorie surplus. That's a great thing. No weight gain. Now, in the case of someone who's an athlete, a low metabolic rate also means less recovery. Because when someone goes through an intense exercise, the body needs to recover. There's several processes that take place, especially when we sleep, that are instrumental in rebuilding damaged tissue, replenishing energy stores. If your metabolic rate is low, it also means that all of these processes are happening at a smaller rate. And as a result, a low metabolic rate is always bad across the board. Just wanted to highlight this because it is obviously a delicate point. We're going into a little bit of more detail here, but for the folks listening, this is something that they may be interested in.
No, great explanation. So then the recommendations, and again, going specifically for this person, looking at his results, was recommended specifically to do cardio training and resistance training, and not really hitting the interval training at this point. So, and then the numbers up here relate to the efforts that are from the app. So then basically we're getting, what's nice here again, Pinoy is providing a session, a recommendation of what they should do, and the number of sets and the time and the zone. And what's nice, and the effort too, and what's nice is, and we'll go down, I'm just going to skip right down. It also gives us, obviously, if they were going to do intervals, what examples of those are, what cardio is relating to, and skeletal muscle. But this is where is the zones? The zones are very powerful, as we know, because now we're not basing them on 220 minus your age, times a certain percentage. We're looking specifically at this person, as well as and their data that was collected during this test, during this peak VO2 test. So it's very specific to them. And this has been a powerful tool for people who want to stay in their zones. The other powerful tool is the one I just passed up, which is this one here, the Fat Max beats per minute. Because in the people I work with, a lot of times there's two goals. There's one goal of, we want cardiovascular fitness for decreased risk heart attack and stroke. So we have to do some things with our heart. Then there's the ones that want to burn fat. And so the best way for people to do this, the most efficient way, is to do a fat burning activity and do a cardio activity or interval activity. And this has been eye-opening for people. Those walks that they take after dinner, or that they never wanted to do because it felt too slow, they weren't working really hard. This is a good way to get them to add this to their program. And I've seen it have remarkable results on people who I actually said, I need you to do some slower activity. I need you to bring it down and stay between 90 and 95 beats a minute for this person. And I actually have a gentleman from Texas who he was shocked because he always did intervals and high intensity, and his was at 86, and he kind of laughed at it. I said, no, just do it for 6 weeks and tell me what, we'll redo your body composition. He lost 6 pounds of body fat. And that was the only real variable he added. So this is golden. And what it also is it's motivating for people that are trying to lose body fat, because actually you want to be in a good body fat level before they start doing some high intensity types of training.
100%. And what we say in Pnoe is that we help health professionals like you prescribe nutrition and training as medicine.
Yes.
And the reality is nutrition and training are medicine. They're actually the most powerful medicine, but we need to treat them as such if they are to work as medicine.
Yeah.
And as a result, just like you identify something in someone's physiology in order to say prescribe statins or prescribe, some sort of therapy,
Yeah.
same holds for the different types of exercise. So we need to understand, and people need to understand that
Yes.
there is specific attributes or benefits or impact that you're going to get from lifting weights versus doing intervals versus doing slow cardio or versus doing continuous running at a higher intensity or versus lifting weights in a different way, for
Yeah.
example, increasing the weight and reducing the reps. Everything you do with your body ultimately has a different impact in your physiology. And in most cases, everything needs to be there at a different proportion.
Yes,
I
that's
would
the
help
key.
people to understand the proportions, but in most cases, everything needs to be there and everything has its place.
And that's the key. The key is that everyone is different. I haven't had anybody who's had this the same. And that's the important part because it's the specificity of training for these people. He was happy to say he doesn't have because intervals is hard. Interval training is tough. I said, so for this next 6 months, we're going to focus on non-interval training things, and we'll retest you, and we'll see where you're at. And this is probably going to shift. I hope it does.
100%, 100%. Yeah. So indeed, quite quite a valuable overview of everything that you can get from our report, and especially when it comes to getting people to understand, okay, why do I need to put this mask on, and what is the information that I'm going to get out of it?
Yeah, it's powerful. It's extremely powerful, and it by no means has it ever been a negative in my practice. It's always been a positive, and the reports are what make it powerful for the patient.
Awesome, awesome. Well, Doctor, thank you so much for your
Thank
time.
you.
It was a pleasure having you and sharing all of the information that you've collected. And yeah, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. And if anybody has any questions or wants to find out about me, optimalheartcenter.com is where we're at. Pretty easy.
Awesome.
Optimalheartcenter.com.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.